Hello and welcome. So it's been coming up for me the last couple of days that I should probably introduce myself. Who am I? What am I? And why am I making these videos? So see if I can do this without having to edit too much. I don't like talking about myself too much, so so I'll just try to be as succinct as possible. So when I was 19 years old, I was through a series of synchronicities connected to an advisor who, when I was in college, brought me up to meet a Siddha guru from India. On that day, I spent about probably 6 or 7 hours in her presence, and I had an experience they refer to as darshan. Darshan literally means to see, but it's also to be in the presence of, to see and be seen by, right? So I did kneel before her and gaze into her eyes. That day later became known as my Divya Diksha Day, which literally means, the anniversary of your initiation. And in this particular situation, it is, or it was, Shaktipat initiation. This was a Shaktipat Siddha Guru. After that experience, in the days and weeks that followed, I started meditating spontaneously. Actually, on the ride home from that experience, I started to hear her voice in my head as if she was speaking directly to me. And I started being drawn into meditation. And how that happened was, I guess the best way I can describe it is, it seemed like there was a really soft, very light and fluffy blanket being drawn over my head. At different points in my day, usually it would be like during a transition point or at the end of an activity or something, and I would come back into my apartment, I would feel this kind of energy come over the top of my head. And I would know that I had to sit down. It would be like, okay, my body would feel heavy and I would sit down. And then I would see her come in front of me and she would kiss me right here on the third eye. And I would go into meditation. And I started doing that and having that experience on a regular basis. So I started spontaneously meditating, kind of almost against my will, but also I also loved it. Like I started to crave it more and more. Now, that was 34 years ago. And since then, well, in the year following that initial experience, my entire life changed. I got into a relationship with a therapist who was in the process of getting their master's degree in transpersonal psychology. We started traveling around the country working with pioneers in the field of transpersonal psychology. I worked with, I don't know if you know any of these names or not, but I'll drop a few names. Stan Groff, who created holotropic breathwork, I worked with him on many occasions. Who are some of the other people? I don't like talking like this, it kind of bothers me. But worked with many people, movement therapists, sound healers, sound therapists, art therapists, doing visualizations and meditations. And, all the people from the 60s and 70s who were bringing and exploring, bringing East and West philosophies and practices together and starting to bring them more into the mainstream. This was in the early to mid 90s, so they were really at their kind of height there. So, I started doing that over the course of the next 8 years. That's what I was doing basically all through my 20s. That culminated in me getting a master's degree in fine arts. And while I was getting my master's degree in fine arts, I started reading a book called The Yoga Vashista, or Vashista's Yoga, as part of my master's thesis studies, in which I wrote my thesis on film and consciousness. After I graduated from graduate school, I really felt very drawn and compelled to go and start spending more time at the ashram with my guru. And I went to a couple of weekend retreats on meditation and stuff like that. And during those retreats, I noticed there were really significant shifts happening in my internal environment, in the way that my mind was presenting itself, the way it was acting and reacting. The thoughts inside my head were radically changing, and I was taking note of it. I also started reading several other scriptures during that time, which ended up causing me to then move up to the ashram. I lived there for about 3 years. During that time, she was in residence there, so I was in her presence quite frequently. However, most of the direct communication that we had was in meditation. I was having conversations with her inside my head that were undeniable and very clear and quite profound. After moving out of the ashram, I continued on with a very intense meditation practice. So right before moving up there, and then for many years after, I was in the habit of meditating for anywhere from 5 to 10 hours a day, every single day. So I continued that practice after moving back into life. And I was working as a temp, so I would get up early and meditate for several hours in the morning, then go to work. And then on my lunch break, I would sit in my car and meditate for an hour and then go back to work. And then at the end of the day, I would come home and sit in my chair and meditate for another few hours before having dinner. So, so I'm going to say that for about 10 years, in the middle of the last 34 years of my life, I was in the habit of meditating for extended periods of time every single day. And I'm now still in the habit of meditating every day for at least 2 hours, sometimes longer, but very rarely less than that. There are very few people in the world, I now know, who feel compelled to meditate that much for that long, for these prolonged periods of meditation, going that deep. Even people who want to do that and feel like inspired to do that, or desire to do that, quite often can't fit it into their life in some way, but for whatever reason, I guess it's because I made a contract before I came into this life, I have been able to structure and arrange my life in such a way that I am able to do that. It hasn't been easy. I've had to make a lot of sacrifices and go without quite frequently, lots of normal types of things. But for me, it's been worth it. I wouldn't change it for the world. Meditation is, I've said this in some of my other videos, and I'm going to repeat it again and again. I'll come up with some catchy ways of conveying this information as we move forward. There's nothing like meditation. If you get into the habit of doing it and you fall in love with it, you don't need to do it for hours and hours and hours. You can do it for 20 minutes or an hour and still experience tremendous benefits. But it's one of those kinds of things that, I don't want to be the kind of person that, there's lots of people on YouTube that talk and talk and talk, right? That's not what I really want to do here. I want to be your partner in the doing, right? So you don't feel like you have to do it alone and you have a guide, okay? So about a year ago, I celebrated my 33rd Diva Diksha last year, and I started to get information and messages from all sorts of different locations coming at me inside and outside, telling me that I needed to start making meditation videos. So this is what I'm doing now. So without further ado, let's do the thing. Right? Let's do it. Do the most important work so that we can have the experience of being, all the different facets of beingness that you can access and experience through the doing of meditation. Let's do that now. Let's turn within. Now, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. Okay, meditation is for you, right? You don't have to. It doesn't have to meet any criteria or any ideas, preconceived notions about what it's supposed to look like or how it's supposed to be. The only things that are really important is that you stay upright, right? Because you don't want to fall asleep. Okay, you want to stay conscious and aware, and that you focus on your breath and you pay attention to what's happening in here. Okay, there's lots of different phases that you're going to go through and lots of different things that you're going to realize. I'm really big on mental discipline, and I can talk more about that later. But watching the mind and paying attention to the mind, okay, noticing the mind, what its natural tendency is. How it determines so many things for you on autopilot. And then consciously intervening on that mechanism that seems to have a life of its own, right? Seems to have its own trajectory. That we can take conscious control of it, okay? Start to direct it and discipline it. So we're settling in to our seat. And you are resting into yourself. With each out breath, allowing the weight of your body, okay, your skin, your muscles, drape down and drop down around your skeletal structure. Really finding a balanced posture where the structure of your bones is holding you up, right? And everything else kind of just melts around it. Whether you're new to meditation or you've been meditating for a while, just get really familiar with your breath. Focusing on your breath as it goes in, how it affects your body, and then as it goes out, how you can allow the weight of your body to settle in a little bit more on each out breath. And today, I think that we're going to talk about silence. Well, what is silence? When they talk about silence in meditation, what are they referring to? Okay, because if you're listening and paying attention, right, is there really anything? Is there really any such thing as silence, right? You're hearing ambient noises in your house. Like I hear my refrigerator, I hear cars passing by on the street. I live in the middle of a city, so You might hear birds outside your window. I hear someone playing music in the background, in the distance. If you have tinnitus, you might hear a buzzing or a ringing in your ears. You hear the sounds of your own body. You hear the breath coming in and out. You might hear your heart beat or your stomach and your intestines making gurgling noises. The sound of your saliva in your mouth as you swallow and your tongue moving around inside your mouth. And take a moment to notice all the things that you hear as individual things. I hear this. I hear that. You might also be hearing thoughts in your head. Okay, so now we're going to bring our awareness, hand it back just a little bit, open it up. So instead of taking note of the individual things that you hear, start to take them all in. So everything that you hear, all the individual sounds are going to make up one field of sound. You're hearing everything all at once. And try to pull back the tendency and restrain yourself a little bit from continuing to identify the individual sounds. Keep pulling your awareness back and opening your field of your auditory field up. Take all the sounds in at once. Okay, so what does this have to do with silence? Where is the silence in all these sounds? Where is the silence within which the auditory field of awareness floats? It all floats in silence. As you're pulling back your awareness from the individual sounds and from the field within which all these sounds float and exist, are created and dissolve. Bring your awareness back. Open it up. To the 99.99999% of emptiness within which all of this exists. If you get lost and you lose your way, you get caught up in a thought stream, a story, conversation that you're having with yourself or that you had with someone else earlier today or yesterday or last week, bring your attention back to your breath. So that's one aspect of silence. It's one of the things that they refer to when they talk about silence and meditation and consciousness, field of awareness. Another aspect of silence is this space in between words. So when you breathe in, I want you to hold your breath at the top for just a second. There's a stillness there before you release the air back out, and after you release the air, there's a stillness and a silence at the end of the breath before you pull it back in. In the same way that at the end of a thought or at the end of a sentence, there's a stopping point before the next thought, before the next sentence, before the next word arises. And we're going to focus on the space in between the words. Allow those spaces to get a little bit wider and a little bit wider, slowing down the thought stream. You might want to use a mantra to, if you need to discipline your mind still and you're having a hard time, like, whoa, there's a whole lot of activity happening up here. Like, there's no space in between any words. What is she talking about, space between the words? The words are jumping over each other and filling in all the gaps. So let's do Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya on the in-breath. And Om Namah Shivaya on the out-breath. Om Namah Shivaya on the in-breath. Pause. Om Namah Shivaya on the out-breath. Pause. Om Namah Shivaya on the in-breath. Pause. Om Namah Shivaya on the out-breath. Pause. As you continue to do this practice of mantra repetition, you're going to notice that the pauses in between each recitation start to get wider. So now we're focusing, once we have our mind automatically repeating the mantra, now we're focusing on the space in between the repetitions. I hesitate to say anything because you might be just now dropping into a really nice deep place. As those spaces in between the mantra repetitions become wider and wider, you're going to notice you're going to start dropping in. You're going to start dropping into, they call it transcending, but you're going to start dropping into a different state altogether. And that's what they talk about. That's what they mean when they say silence. You're going to start to experience it on a whole other level. So when you start falling into those spaces in between the mantras, in between the mantra repetitions, when you start dropping into the spaces between your thoughts, you're going to lose, well, actually, you don't really lose it. On a certain level, you're going to lose awareness of the sounds, the auditory field, right, that your ears are picking up on. So yes and no, right? You kind of evaporate into it, actually. You can still hear it, right? But you're also accessing it on a deeper level. I encourage you to continue to practice this. And just so you know, this has been coming up for me a lot, so I feel like I need to say it. If you've made it to this point in the video, if you've stuck with me, if you've seen a couple other of my videos, you got it, okay? Look at me. You're good, right? You got it. You made a connection to a lineage of meditation masters. I'm choking up saying it. Okay. You're receiving energy from them that is blessing and gracing your practice. You are protected. No joke. It's a very real thing happening. So sit every day. Even if it's hard. Even if you're just sitting and you're kind of like, ugh. Sometimes it's hard to just allow yourself to be. And rewards are, I can't explain it. I can't describe it. It's unlike anything else that you have ever experienced. Keep at it. Okay? Thank you for joining me. Till next time.